Today we are going to be looking at some of the different European Union institutions. One of the principal distinctions between the European Union and the other international organizations existing in the world today is the sophisticated and powerful nature of its institutions. Indeed, unlike most other international organizations, EU member states have transferred a significant part of their national sovereignty to these institutions. It is for this reason that the EU should not be considered to be just another intergovernmental organisation. Instead, it is a coming together of independent nation states that have agreed to pool ever-increasing amounts of their national sovereign powers. However, neither is the European Union a federation of states such as the United States of America. It is a unique hybrid organisation, part federal and part intergovernmental. Now let's look at the primary institutions of the European Union, beginning with the Council of the European Union. The Council of the European Union is not to be confused with either the European Council, which is another EU institution made up of the heads of state of each of the EU member states, or the Council of Europe, which is a separate European organisation established after World War II to promote democracy and human rights throughout Europe. The Council was first established under the European Coal and Steel Treaty in 1951. Along with the other European Coal and Steel Community institutions, it was merged with the institutions of the European Economic Community, or EEC, in 1967. The Council, as an institution, is said to wed together, or to bring together, the themes of member state nationalism and EU federalism. This is because, although it is made up of ministers from each of the 28 member state executive branches, which is a nationalistic characteristic, it operates, for the most part, by majority vote, and thus individual member states cannot exercise a right of veto, and this gives the Council a federal character. Thus, it is at one and the same time both a federalist and intergovernmental institution. The actual composition of the Council varies with the area under discussion. For example, if the matter being dealt with involves the environment, then the Council will be made up of environmental ministers from each of the member states. If the matter involves finance, then the member state finance ministers will attend, and the Finance Council is called ECOFIN. The presidency of the Council is enjoyed on a rotating basis by each of the 28 member states for a period of 6 months. However, in order to ensure a seamless transfer of responsibility between each member state presidency, the Council presidency system is organised around what is known as presidency trios. Under this system, each trio exists for a period of 18 months, composed of the former, present and future presidency member states working together to coordinate the work of the presidency between them. The primary role of the EU member state actually holding the presidency is to chair council meetings and to broker the adoption of legislation both within the Council itself and between the Council and the other EU institutions. The Council has a number of different functions. The first is its legislative function. The primary role of the Council is the adoption of legislation. The majority of Council legislative acts are adopted by way of qualified majority voting, or QMV, under what is referred to as the Ordinary Legislative Procedure, OLP. In order for a legislative proposal to be adopted by the Council under QMV, a certain number of votes have to be cast, each member state having been awarded a varying number of votes depending on criteria such as population, economic power and landmass. Effectively, the bigger a member state, the more votes it has. Pursuant to this system, called a double majority voting system, a legislative proposal in order to be adopted by the Council, must be supported by a sufficient number of Member States representing two separate but cumulative majority criteria. The first is that a majority of 55% of the Member States be in favour of the proposal. The second requirement is that a majority of Member States representing 65% of the EU's overall population be in favour of the proposal. However, in a limited number of areas, the Council may only adopt legislation by acting unanimously. In such cases, the Council is only required to consult with the Parliament prior to adopting the legislation. In all other areas, legislative power is shared with the Parliament. The second area of Council activity comes under the heading of Foreign Affairs. The area of foreign affairs and defence come within the sovereignty of the individual Member States. However, consistent attempts have been made at EU level to coordinate Member State foreign affairs and defence policy under what is known as the Common Foreign and Security Policy. Under this policy, if Member States adopt a common position on a foreign policy issue, they are then required to promote and defend the policy when conducting their foreign policy on a domestic basis. Exceptionally, Council meetings on foreign affairs are chaired not by the Foreign Affairs Minister of the Member State enjoying the 6-month presidency of the Council, but by the High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy. Further, certain Member States such as the United Kingdom and France have heightened military cooperation between them, developing rapid reaction forces, permitting joint responses and facilitating joint peacekeeping activities. The final heading of Council power comes under the heading of budgetary powers. The Council, along with the European Parliament, must approve the EU's annual budget. The Council also coordinates the economic policy of the 28 Member States, allowing the development of common economic goals between the Member States. The recent euro crisis has served to reinforce the importance of coordinating Member State national economic policy, especially within the euro area. Now let's look at the second legislative branch of the European Union, the European Parliament, which is probably the most federal of the EU's institutions. The European Parliament is directly elected by the citizens of Europe for a 5-year mandate. Originally referred to as the Common Assembly under the ECST, the European Coal and Steel Treaty, the role of the Parliament has grown from an advisory body to a fully fledged partner in the EU legislative process. As we have seen, the power of the Parliament has grown gradually, with each treaty granting it more powers. The Parliament now shares equal budgetary powers with the Council and has almost equivalent legislative power. Moreover, it has other important powers concerning the appointment of commissioners to the European Commission. The Parliament's power can be discussed under the following headings. Firstly, its legislative power. As we have seen, most EU legislation is adopted by OLP, or Ordinary Legislative Procedure. Pursuant to this procedure, a proposal for a law may only be adopted if both the Council and the Parliament agree to its provisions. Under OLP, a proposal for a law is sent to both the Parliament and the Council by the European Commission. Both bodies then carry out a number of readings of the proposal, suggesting their amendments, if any. If, after the reading stage, both institutions are in agreement, the proposal is adopted. If not, the matter is sent for conciliation to a committee, a conciliation committee, established for this purpose. If the conciliation committee reaches agreement, the matter is sent back to both institutions for a third reading. The agreement of both institutions is required for the proposal to be adopted into law. Now let's look at the Parliament's budgetary power. As we have seen, the Parliament and the Council share budgetary powers between them, and the agreement of both institutions is required for the adoption of the EU's annual budget. In the past, the Parliament has refused to approve the adoption of the budget on grounds of corruption and mismanagement of finances on the part of other EU institutions. Finally, the Parliament has control over the appointment of members of the European Court of Auditors, the ECA, and the President of the European Central Bank, the ECB. Further, the ECB has to present its annual account to the Parliament every year. Finally, let's take a look at the control the Parliament exercises over the European Commission. Like most Western national legislatives, the Parliament exercises control over the EU's executive branch, the European Commission. The approval of the Parliament is necessary for the appointment of the President of the European Commission, and moreover, the Parliament also conducts interviews or hearings of proposed European Commissioners and has in the past refused to approve a proposed candidate. The Parliament can also call for the resignation of the entire Commission and has already exercised this power in the past. Members of Parliament also have the right to ask questions of the European Commission as regards its activities and must receive reasoned replies to their questions. The final power of the Parliament is its supervisory role. The Parliament has a general supervisory role that can bring the other institutions before the Court of Justice if they fail, in the Parliament's opinion, to respect the laws and treaties governing the Union. Now, let's look at one of the more intergovernmental institutions, the European Council. The European Council officially became an EU institution in 2009 under the Lisbon Treaty and is now made up of the 28 member state heads of state and its president. The Council has been meeting informally since 1979, but its role became increasingly important as the EU's membership expanded. Along with the European Commission, the European Council brings together the executive power of the Union. The primary function of the European Council is to establish the EU's general political direction, as well as being responsible for the conclusion of negotiations on complex or sensitive issues that cannot be resolved at the level of the Council of the European Union, meeting at ministerial level. The drafting of EU treaties is normally preceded by a European Council meeting. However, it is important to remember that the Council has no actual power to adopt law. This remains within the control of the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union. The European Council plays a particularly important role in areas such as foreign policy or when the EU is faced with an emergency, such as the stability of the euro. The Council appoints its own president and is also responsible for the appointment of the President of the European Commission and the European Central Bank. It also appoints the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy. We hope you enjoyed this introduction to some of the primary institutions developed by the European Union.